And then Brandon is going to do a land acknowledgement from Vashon Island. So yeah, so maybe we can just arrive with three breaths together. And what I was wanting to, oh gosh, you want to put yourselves on mute if you're not, yeah. Um, yeah, is really inviting in a sense of somewhere you may have walked in the last week, somewhere in your local landscape where as you're breathing in, just breathe in what those scents are, what you were feeling in your body as you were walking, and just try and picture yourself in your place where you may have been walking. So let's just take three breaths in together. And we know that when we take time to breathe in deeply, there is something that happens to us that just actually calms our whole nervous system down. And being doing that together, there's something about arriving together doing that. So maybe take a last breath in, really feel your chest filling, and then when you let it out, maybe just let it out with a sound. So welcome everyone, and it's really great to have you everyone here. And we've got three really special guests. We haven't seen Taya for a while, and she's one of the and Mahul Sangham and Guy Harrington, all from the BioFi program. So, but they will. So anyway, we'll lead you through the program in a bit. But I'm going to hand over to Brandon right now to do the land acknowledgement.
Yeah. Well, and before we get started, maybe it would be wonderful actually just to give just 30 seconds or a minute or two of Taya, Mahol, and Gaia. Would you like to say hi and just introduce yourselves and who you are, just so people can have an idea? And Taya, why don't you start us off?
I had a feeling you were suggesting that order. So great to see familiar, friendly faces again, and also some new faces on the call. I think most of you know I connected with Claire and Brandon when all three of us met in the Edge Prize Accelerator over 4 years ago, and we've been working together on the spark of their vision around Regenerate Cascadia for the last 3 years. My role initially in the early stages was very much a strategic development role, which was how do we hold the whole while we're stabilizing around our own operational funding. How do we build out our programs? How do we translate the black box of visioning work into operational programs? And being a whole systems practitioner, part of that is jumping in to where you're needed. And so launching the LHC was a really huge lift for us, as you may have noticed. And so I stepped into program manager role for a particular period of time to get that infrastructure up and running. And I'm now transitioning into a strategic development role again. So that's my RC introduction, and I'll hand over to Gaia.
Thank you. I always say something different on these things, these introductions. So I feel like I'm not maybe not good at it. And I'm gonna do the same thing today. Because I just got an email that just stuck in my head, so I might as well share it. But so my name is Gaia Harrington. I guess I was a sustainability researcher for a long time. And then I went by well-being economist. So I did an update to the limits to growth, the bestseller in 1972. Some of you may have read it or heard of it. And it showed it was an MIT model that showed different kind of scenarios depending on what choices we would make as human civilization. The business as usual scenario ran on historical averages only. I did an empirical data update, and we're most closely aligned with the business as usual scenario, which shows a collapse and again around present time. So at the time, decades in the future, and now like this is it. And so since then, I've talked about we need to let go of this growth pursuit that's at the heart of our economy. For most of the time in history, we have not organized around perpetual growth, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I have recently come to conclude that collapse is not avoidable and that we don't know, but I personally believe we're already in it. And so I was looking would collapse resilience look like, and that's how I found bioregionalism. And that's I got a email today from a young man called I guess technically a boy. He's 17 years old, called Jeremiah, and he says I'm scared of the limits to growth because I ever since I read your study, now I'm having panic attacks because I don't want to die, and I don't want 2040 to be the last good year for me. And so I'm going to email him back after this, saying, well, there is something, and it doesn't even matter where you are. You can start wherever you are, building community resilience in your local ecosystem limits, connected to place and connected to your community. And I feel so that's a long story of why I joined Regenerate Cascadia. I have a background in econometrics and in the financial sector, unfortunately. And so that's how I ended up as the BioFi person here.
Where are you located, Gaia, geographically?
Yeah, see, I should have said that. This is why I suck at introductions. I'm in the Seattle area, Mercer Island.
Yeah. And Mahol.
Thanks. Yeah, good to meet you all. I'm calling from Vancouver. I'm actually looking at the Fraser River right now. It's a beautiful day. And I'm originally from South Africa. I was born in Zululand on the east coast of South Africa. Lived most of my life there, and I've lived in parts of North America over the last 10 years. And yeah, I have a background in systems thinking, complexity science. I have completed a PhD in kind of the ontology of information theory and cybernetics, um, and spent a lot of time thinking about information intelligence and consciousness. I before the current role that I do, which is director at Narrative Intelligence, I founded a not-for-profit called Culture Hack, which worked with activists from around the world, and we trained them and led a peer-led fellowship over a year for 10 years on narrative-led systems change, which is really examining the role between systems thinking and also how we make meaning and understand systems, which, if you know anything about cybernetics, it's like third order cybernetics thinking. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about the relationship between meaning and matter. So all of that might seem a little disjuncted from bioregional financing, which it does in some sense, but as Guy was so eloquently articulating, we're at and amidst the collapse of Western civilization and all the parts of the parts of it. So I see bioregionalism as a really key capacity uh, for transition through post-capitalist world, a post-anthropocentric world. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to spend my time focusing on bioregionalism and bioregional financing is because I think bioregionalism also has the greatest import, kind of potential to transform the system as the system collapses in terms of creating these localized regenerative pieces. But it also has a lot of power for us to transform our consciousness from people who are subjects within a society to people who are in a relational web, not only with each other, but with nature, with the more than human. And so that's really my super kind of focus right now, and really excited to be part of the team. I have also done a lot of work on developing financial instruments like water bonds and regenerative bonds. And I think it's a really interesting time, a much needed time for all of these pieces to come together. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me. and good to join you all here and speak to you all soon.
Yeah. So thank you, Taya, Gaia, and Mahol. And yeah, we will look forward to, I think so. The entire second half, I think, in the end of our class will be dedicated to, we'll just kind of give space to really turn it over to them. And we'd love to just have it be very conversational, very informal, but a wonderful opportunity for people to be able to ask questions as well. And just in terms of the flow tonight, so I am just going to start with like kind of following in our tradition of different land acknowledgements. I'm going to give a presence of recognition here for Vashon Island. And then I think we will give space and actually turn it over to the landscape groups and stewards. We'd love to hear from you. Just do a quick surfacing round for updates, everything you've been up to, anything that's burning questions that you'd like to learn more about. And then Claire's going to do a quick just discussion around mapping value in the landscape, making the invisible visible. If there's time, I'll do a quick little just chat around what are funders looking for, kind of in response to David's question from Whidbey. And that can also be very relational. I think what's beautiful is we have a wonderful group in the room who can probably also help to answer that. And but just to start, yeah, so I just wanted to give a kind of an acknowledgement, a recognition of presence for Vashon Island. And the reason we're using this term recognition of presence is just we're trying something new. And this idea of a recognition of presence came out of a conversation that Claire Atwell and myself were having as part of the Turtle Island Bioregional Congress art team. And so Beverly Natus, Aloysius with Heron's Nest, Meg McHutchinson and Lily Falconer, and really talking about land acknowledgements and how sometimes they can become very stale or they only acknowledge the past, and so they can become very performative. And so what can we do instead of that? And so we kind of really wanted to try to kind of find a way to play with this idea of a recognition of presence that also can surface an ongoing relationship and practice with the places that we live in. And so I thought I would give that a try. Um, yeah, so we stand on Vashon and Maury Island in the fullest light of the year. The days are stretching as long as they will go. The sun rose last week at its earliest, and at the solstice, it will seem to pause at the top of the sky before the year turns slowly back towards the dark. We begin in this fullness by recognizing where we are. This ground is the gift of ice. The last great glaciation to shape Puget Sound carries the island's own name, Vashon. It ground south under more than half a mile of ice, more than 2,500 feet thick, as it withdrew some 15,000 years ago. It left the hills, the bluffs, the layered beds of sand and clay beneath our feet. Every drop of fresh water on this island falls here as rain and is held in the island's own aquifer. Vashon makes its own water. When we drink the rain this place has kept. This land is the land of the Shuabash, the swift water people who have lived with these waters since time immemorial, and who are here today as members of the Puyallup tribe. The relatives among the Coast Salish peoples, the Suquamish and the others, have long moved through these shared waters by kinship and trade. The name we most often use, Vashon, was written onto a chart by a British navigator in 1792 for an admiral who never came. The older truth is that this is the land of the Swiftwater people. A woman named Lucy Gironde, born at Quartermaster Harbor, carried many of this island's names forward so that they would not be lost. We recognize honestly under the Treaty of Medicine Creek, signed in 1854, the people of this place were removed to the Puyallup Reservation, and that our presence here continues a history whose aim was to end that relationship they have never stopped keeping. Their language, once called dead, is not. It is spoken and taught again. In that language, this moon of mid-June is named for the salmonberry, the first fruit of the year. Walk the edge of woods right now, and you will find it ripening orange and red on the cane, the first sweetness after a long wet season. This is a moon of first foods and of going out onto the water. The living island is busy with it. Along the alders of Moletta Creek, where great blue herons once gathered, in what was one of the great rookeries of the Sound, bald eagles have come, and the herons have moved to quieter nests. Fawns and deer lie hidden in valleys of salal. Young salmon move along shallows, feeding and growing in the eel grass and the kelp. And the bull kelp itself climbs towards the surface, a hand's width a day. Here in the Salish Sea at midday last Sunday, oh, sorry, this is a little off date, but it was the lowest tide of the year, which drew the water back, and we got to enjoy it with friends and walk along it as part of the low tide festival here that happens here each year. We are part of that sea, and we name what is thriving and what is in trouble because honest recognition does not look away. A century ago, this island was a mature coastal rainforest, and then it was logged so completely that you could see from the north end to the south. It is an island healing now, its forests returning, the western red cedar, the tree of life of the people of this coast, growing back among the second growth. Quartermaster Harbor once held the largest herring spawn in the South Sound, the small silver fish on which nearly everything else depends, and in our own lifetime that spawn has fallen nearly silent. The Chinook salmon and the endangered orcas who travel Colville's Passage along the island's west side go hungry for want of them. We hold it all, the abundance of this ripening season, the wounds and the healing that we are called to continue. We name our teachers, we learn the names and the language of this place from the Puyallup, to whom those words belong, and we hold them with respect and without claim. We learn this island from those who have tended it, from those who tend it still, and we tend and steward in our turn for generations yet to come. Life creates the conditions for more life. So at the height of light, before the year turns, we recognize the Swiftwater people, present and enduring, and the living island that holds us. We commit to right relationship, to water we drink, the salmon and the herring, the cedar and the heron, and the people who are still here. We commit to put back more than we take. We commit to the future, and from this fullness, we begin the turn and we carry the work home into the season ahead. So that was just that. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you. That was so nice.
Um, yeah, wondering about going into sharing any updates or things that have been coming up in your landscapes. We'd love to hear. We always really enjoy hearing what's going on, and we've got about 20 minutes for that. So, and I know that Corey, that Whatcom, you've got a bioregional mapping workshop coming up soon. It would be lovely to hear how things are going there.
Yeah, I can start. First on Friday, we had at the last Friday of every month, we have what Brian started 8 or 9 years ago, permaculture meetups. And this one was fun because we met this woman turned her suburban lawn into a food and medicine forest. It's just packed with different foods and trees and medicines, and she knows all about them. And so it's just like, and it's not a big space, but it's just fantastic. And then the other thing it was kind of a rainy day, so we didn't have a big turnout, but there were two people who came to really just connect with us. Howard from Colshine Carbon Trust had something he wanted to talk about, and Ted Terracone stopped by, and it's like, instead of like, usually we'll do a little speech at these things about Regenerate Whatcom, and we didn't really plan anything, but like people showed up to talk about it. So I thought that was kind of cool. And yeah, our mapping workshop is 2 weeks and 2 days from tomorrow. So we're well into logistics, like, what size maps are we going to print, and what are we going to use for an overlay, and how are we, are we getting pastries for the morning? I mean, all those kind of things, as well as planning. Tomorrow, we'll spend a big focus on planning the actual day. So yeah, we're in the weeds. Brian, David.
Yeah, I enjoyed at Jeanette's place the other day. It was great. It was such a juxtaposition. Her like this is suburban cul-de-sacs, houses just stacked one right next to the other. And her place is this amazing food forest, jungle, medicinal, like little trails you go through and all this stuff. And she's talking about everything surrounding it. And then you look at the neighbors, and it's just like this stark mowed lawn that's dying. Like it's mowed to death. I'm like, when are you going to take over the neighborhood here? And she's like, it's happening little by little. Um, anyway, it was good. I thought we had an okay turnout for like one of the rainiest days of this month, um, and stuff. Yeah, I mean, we're moving along. We've got a lot of stuff in planned and logistics, and just need to fine tune everything for the event. I think right now we're trying to keep our attendance at a reasonable level, like around 20 people. We're not trying to go too huge. And we have some really key people that have agreed to be in attendance. And so I'm kind of excited to see what happens when you get them all in the room together. They're all people that each one of us has known for a number of years, that have been really involved in the community in one way or shape or form over the years, and are in key different sectors of involvement. And so, like, what's going to happen? And when we get them into the room, and I'm really wondering, like, how we kind of set the stage of, like, okay, leave your job kind of at the door and just come with an open mind, and engage in this process with without a whole lot of, like, I don't know, baggage that comes with you, or attachment to the outcome, kind of thing. It's just like, it's an experience, and we'll just see where it goes, kind of thing. So I don't know. We're still toying with how to frame that, um, and present that in the beginning. So if anybody has any ideas, open to it.
Yeah,
Um,
anyone else from your group that wants to share on that?
yeah, and David was here. I don't know if he's off camera or what. There he is.
Um, I don't know if there's anything else needed to say. I think well articulated by Corey and Brian.
Yeah. Well, it's really wonderful to hear your plans starting to kind of actually come to, I mean, they're starting to feel very real right now. So, and Brandon and I are going to be coming down to spend the day with you, which is like really excited about seeing that. So, yeah, and then and I know that everybody here is probably like dying to hear how it goes. So hopefully there's lots of um, uh, some planning around documentation or photographs and stuff just for the storytelling afterwards.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
How about others? Is there either stuff related to your organizing or something else going on in your landscapes that you'd like to share?
I'd like to jump in just because so much is brewing, and I'm gonna do my very best to represent without Mayana here. And um, I know it's nice to meet you, Mahul, that you and Mayana have had the chance to get together. And looking at the Fraser Lowland has been such a potent, ready to pop opportunity. And yesterday we had just an amazing meeting of the three founders of the Pivot. And so we have a workshop planned. We're so grateful for Regenerate Cascadia's support and focus in on this one little piece. And the way that we've been evolving as a team over 6 years, it's hard to believe. Mayana and I working for 3 years just on the Pivot alone, has been to be that storing, supportive container, that mycelial layer of the coordination layer that's so required when you have these kinds of amazing elements we're trying to map and bring together, so that the next phase of implementation, the next phase of looking to see, are we actually doing what we're intending to do? Are we holding core purpose together? And if so, how's it going? The feedback loops, the evaluation, all the sort of integrative governance, stewarding factors along with implementation and wisdom that we know we need as collapse occurs. You've got to have those elements, right? But what we've come up to become very aware of, and let me just back up from that, we had this incredible gathering of investors who are looking to get involved in systemic investing only after really kind of understanding what it was. We had a workshop there in Vancouver. I came up, we had a whole team of women come up. We held this beautiful space. And these investors used to get together and just have coffee and breakfast and talk about money issues. Got together and realized, you know what, it's kind of fallen apart. How do you actually invest in systems instead of one-off enterprises? What does it mean to look at things with ecosystemic thinking? And if we could wave a magic wand in our world here, what would we do to make an infrastructure that's going to last? So there was all of this energy and excitement about it. And the truth is, as you start to look at shifting the allocation of resources from one-off things into larger, interrelated, much more than ROI thinking, people aren't ready for that still. It's really a challenge. So Mayana, God love her, she it's gonna be great to share this recording. She really focused in on this idea of a strategic capital advisor, someone who does get what the importance is of this kind of ecosystem thinking and bringing that into the field of funders so that we can start to actually land resources into something where the mapping and all the work we would do would actually land and keep moving. And it didn't follow through. It's very nascent. It's very new. So I just want to share. Yeah, love it, right? Absolutely. And we have paper. I mean, you can imagine. It's just how we do things at the Pivot. But yesterday we had this meeting, as I said, where we are recognizing as the three co-founders, where I tend to gravitate towards the wisdom, counsel, thinking of things. Mayan is definitely a stored. And Wendy is more about the collaboration layer and the infrastructure and the IT. And we've been working for a long time each together and in our lanes to bring this together. And the truth is we've been working unfunded for years. And the fatigue is really setting in. The fatigue and the realization that if you keep trying to push noodles uphill, they just end up falling in a messy pile on top of you. And that's not how we want to work. All of us need to have this sense of buoyancy. So just a very brief understanding that there are emergent trust organizations that are coming into our field that we're recognizing maybe our role now is to be part of a larger trust infrastructure. And yet still, and this has always been our conundrum with beautiful Regenerate Cascadia, how do we hold this very solid, tangible, practical piece that you're helping us to anchor within the larger context of what we're trying to do in an ecosystem? And I have zero answers. I just feel like I need to bring that into the field. I want to really honor Mayan and all the work that we've done as a team around that. And we're really in a questioning role right now because just as you know, it's what we've organized ourselves to help address is these people who are busier than one-armed paper hangers trying to get all this stuff done. To get wind under their wings is like the essential thing. And now we're realizing for ourselves that buoyancy is absolutely critical for us too. So how do we move to the next steps? And the fact is, I don't know how it's going to go. It's really crazy. So I stop there.
And I just want to throw out, and with that, and with honoring Mayana since she's not here, Fraser Lowlands is a part of the Ma Earth Funding Round 3, which starts tomorrow. And so it's a wonderful opportunity of I think it's based on quadratic funding. So it's like lots of small donations go a long way, like a couple bucks, $5, $10. And then Ma Earth is matching three to $15,000 per project based on that funding round. So while in the grand scheme of things, it's not huge. I think it's really exciting and will support Fraser Lowland's efforts with the Co-Food Vancouver and the plot of land that they're working with Emily. So very, very exciting and lots of updates. So it's incredible to see all the work you're doing and holding, Melanie. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Brandon. I mean, in the big scheme, I didn't even mention that. It's like really important. So thank you for bringing that up.
No worries. And I hope everybody pitches in.
Yeah. And one thing I would love to just draw attention to is one of the reasons why it doesn't feel like we started with bioregional mapping, but really the idea was to get to this place where we're starting to do the bioregional mapping workshops. But really underlying that understanding is when we let the land lead what we're supposed to be doing, that there is a kind of organizing that's able to happen. And, that overwhelm, once we start to understand how the land is working, like through the bioregional mapping, as we've been talking, there is a kind of, like we keep pointing to that, it's the aspiration anyways, is that there is a way of taking some of the pressure off because it becomes clear that certain things are not ready or aligned enough to um, for what you're trying to do. So anyways, the bioregional mapping is definitely that starting place. And I just wanted to kind of just draw us back to that. And yeah, looking forward to more reports of how it actually is going. Kim, you had your hand up, and I'd love to hear from you.
Oh, thanks, Claire. Yeah, I just I'd just go for it and start off for the Duwamish River Valley. Lots of wonderful energy and happening here. I um, I think I might have shared that on June 21st we celebrated Go Skateboarding Day, um, which is also the solstice, which is also a day we call Monk Day, who is our one of our friends, our visionary skate park designer builder, who we honor for the day. And it was really wonderful. I mean, it's just where my heart has been for the past 20 plus years, as a skateboarder, snowboarder, someone who, yeah, just loves place and community. It's, I want to start with that and then also kind of blend it in because we are along a highway and I have been part of a coalition called Reconnect South Park for going on 5 years now. And we just reached a milestone. We um, published the potential futures analysis report, and it was okayed by the city in partnership. Like the city is part of the coalition, and WashDOT signed off on it. So it's a really big deal, and it talks about the four potential futures. So, and one of them is removing the highway, 4 miles of Highway 99 that goes along almost very closely along the Duwamish River from Seattle, South Park, Seattle to the Tukwila International Boulevard. So, I mean, just the potential is just so beautiful right now. And I can't remember if we mentioned, but we also secured a grant. Well, secures is a terrible word probably, but we got a state grant called the Sandy Williams grant. So that'll help fund us and this project, not us, but I mean this movement for the next 2.5 years at least. And it just gives us so much hope. And Debbie joined the team, the Reconnect South Park team too. So woo, yay. There's so much more to share, but it really, if you just Googled, or I hate that even, but if you searched for Reconnect South Park, and you'll see that there. And I just think about all of you because I mean, we're doing the things that we're talking about. Like we might not have a bioregional mapping workshop, but we are actually like doing these things. I'm learning so much from all of you, and I just can't wait to especially step into this next phase because I think about this intersection that we need between placemakers or place-based people and institutional change makers, people in the financial institutions and policy people. And then like the digital people, the technical people, the people who can help with a platform of sorts to like, so that things are transparent and there's, we see what's going on and what's happening with money really, and helping it flow towards people, all the things. So anyway, that's probably a lot, but Debbie or Christoph, I know there's more to add about, there's green drinks happening here. I don't know. Debbie or Christoph?
Sure, I can go ahead and add. Unless Debbie, did you have something you wanted to add? Okay, yeah, I didn't see you come off mute, so that's why I jumped in. Um, yeah, so we just really been focusing on engaging with our community over the summer months. We went and visited Brandon and Sue during Low Tide Festival over on Vashon. Had a wonderful time. It was, one of those gorgeous sunny Sundays. A couple of weeks ago, I think it was already. Maybe it was only a week ago. It seems like it's forever with all the gray we've been having, but had a beautiful time over there. And yeah, going from something like that to doing something like a community carnival that happened in Georgetown, where I was tabling with Watershed Community Development, which is working on a regenerative urban food system as part of a large multi-block affordable community housing development project for artists. And I've really been really inspired by all the food systems work we've been doing around that to bring some food access and food justice to a food desert in the Georgetown community. So bringing in a community grocery store combined with a food bank, combined with some opportunities for community to grow food in greenhouses and in other spaces that can be somewhat enclosed and protected from all the pollution in the area that we have from planes and from diesel trains and cars and all those things. So really inspired by that project. So yeah, we've just been doing a lot of community engagement and being in community every chance we get. Kim is all over the place, going to all sorts of events, and so is Debbie and myself, and we sometimes have an opportunity to do that together. So we've just been doing a lot of that, just a lot of that sort of relational tending, as we like to say, right? And fostering these relationships. And I'll just add one more thing. There's a really foundational community organization called Duwamish River Community Coalition who's been doing environmental resilience and environmental justice work in South Park and in the Duwamish Valley. And they're one of the core community organizations who have been working with the city of Seattle and who have been getting a lot of EPA funding around resiliency and the EPA Superfund site. And had a conversation with the director from DRCC at the Georgetown Carnival because she was also tabling with Watershed Community Development. She's on the board of directors there, and we just had a really wonderful conversation around the need and the desire to start to bridge the gap between the two communities, between South Park and Georgetown. South Park is a really diverse, community, a large, twice the size in terms of its residential capacity of people living there to Georgetown. And Georgetown's more of a working class industrial kind of arts community. And at that festival, at the carnival, the artists from Equinox had built this beautiful bridge they called the Bridge of Belonging. And folks would come by for the carnival and they would write different messages on flags to put on the bridge, or they would lay down on fabric and have a chalk outline of them drawn and cut out in different colors of fabric. And all of these flags and different colors of people's outlines and dynamic poses were put on this bridge of belonging. And every time people added stuff to the bridge would be raised and there'd be a big celebration, and then it would come back down and more folks would add to the bridge. And so it was this beautiful artistic project and metaphor for how we can start to connect communities, either that are bisected from a natural river like the Duwamish River, or what's happening with Reconnect South Park, where a community was literally bisected by the freeway back in the 60s and is now looking at rehealing and reconnecting the landscape and the community by removing that highway. So a lot of reconnecting going on in our communities.
Yeah, I'd like to add also, the morning of the carnival, Kim and I went up to the rematriation ceremony up at Heron's Nest, where they transferred 3.5 acres back to the Duwamish. And that was incredible. And then we've got our big garden walk here on July 12th, to where Georgetown, our little sliver of people in the whole, industrial area, we have a big garden walk. And yeah, if you want to come on out, come on say hi at my house. And it's an incredible event. You kind of walk through this industry area, and then you come to this big celebration of the Garden City. So that'll be fun too. Yeah.
Amazing. It's fantastic to get your updates. And again, I would love to know, hopefully you're getting some photographs, but just some documentation of what this process that you've engaged with in connecting with community members, is
Yeah.
sometimes yeah, um, that would be fantastic. And yeah, and maybe putting them onto your page would be great, just so that others can see.
Yeah, we'll do that. I did my Super 8 film at the Duwamish to film kind of parts of the rematriation, and then I recorded Ken Workman and all the whole passing off and welcoming in. And so I'll submit that to the Super 8 Festival this year, but I'll put it up on the page. We'll see how it looks. You never really know. You get 3.5 minutes, you get one chance. So
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And we're inspired by your stories, but I'm sure that a lot of other people would be inspired too. And at some point we'll support you in putting some of those stories together. So I think we probably need to move on with the program. Just great to hear from everyone. Um, yeah, so we thought, in sort of keeping with the theme of today, which is really talking about value flow in the landscape, regenerative finance, thinking about new economic systems, that I would focus a little on the mapping side of things and looking at value, um, making the invisible visible, and mapping value in the landscape. And just some examples that I thought were they're just flashes of uh, projects that are really inspiring, but that just give different aspects. And it's just a different way of looking at bioregional mapping. So I'm going to share my screen. Um, and then, okay. So can you see, is the slide showing?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, so this is from a project that I often refer back to, the Islands of the Salem Sea Community Art Mapping Project. And so this was in the early 2000s. The Salish Sea was just being named the Salish Sea. And they came together at the different islands to map their home places, and some of the things that were driving the questions they were asking was, what about a new economic system, for like, what does it mean to think about where the value is, and what does that look like from the perspective of the people actually living there? And so I thought this was a great map. It just showed some of the islands that participated in that project. Just a few of them. There are a lot more of them that participated. But just to point out, what they did was they started looking, so different projects, different groups looked at different things. But so I've taken just a smattering of the different examples of it, just so that we could see it. So they were looking at what existed that maybe was part of the work that people were involved in. So logging and tourism and farming. But then they also looked at, like, what are the things that they enjoyed doing? And so a lot of the emphasis of this project was using artists to capture some of what they were valuing. And many of these maps also have writing or words or poetry that symbolizes what was being lifted up. And at the bottom of this map is my strength is from the fish, my blood is from the roots and berries. And that was Chief Wynok from 1915. So this was happening at the same time as the LHC Community Art Mapping Project, but it was this it was their what was it? Their conservancy, and that where they want to look at the value in their landscape and engage people so that there was a conversation happening around things that they knew were important to them, but also looking at the economic, like all of the different uh, pieces that actually were part of making life happen on the islands. And so they had 4 different workshops that looking at the forest, remnant, Gary Oak Meadows, the marine and foreshore ecosystem, and the freshwater ecosystem. And then they had a 5th workshop looking at the connections between all of those. And but one of the things that was really important, so they didn't really use the arts in this one, but they uh, um, they got people to ground truth the information that they were pulling up from archives and from wherever they could pull information from. They and just by the engagement of people actually verifying things, going out to see what it was before they put it on the map, got people engaged and conversations happening in a way that you can never really be captured on the artifact, but there's an aliveness that starts happening. This was another map from that same project showing, yeah, again, parts of either the economy or places or things that people really valued in their landscape and just really wanting to stop putting it down and putting it from their perspective. And yeah, this is the last of the maps from that book that I wanted to show you. But they were using these all of the around the outside. They actually, if you look over here, I don't know if it's too small to see, but they used an indigenous seasonal calendar. So December, November, October, all of the things that occur or are harvested or there's something significant about them in those months so that they've got a temporality coming into their mapping. So yes, I wanted to bring these in just as a backdrop of a community starting to look at what we've been thinking about in terms of mapping. But now I wanted to look at a particular example from British Columbia. This was a recent presentation that I went to, and I'm going to just apologize right up front for the quality of the slides. I was trying to take photographs of them, and so I've tried to fix them up, but they're a little skewed. So I hope you don't get, seasick looking at them. But yeah, I thought that I would look at logging in British Columbia has always been considered like a big part of the economy here. And that's what I had always, heard and whatever. But it's causing we've heard of Fairy Creek and Carmana and all of that. And the clear-cut logging that is happening with old growth that is just really, really like a really big deal, especially here all over. But and a group of people had come together and said, yeah, we're hitting our limits. And but then they started looking at the information that they were gathering, and they saw that actually it only contributes to 2% of BC's GDP and less than 2% of the provincial employment, which is like, why are we making it was so much destruction happening? It just doesn't make sense economically. And so then they were like asking the question, who's paying for it now? And it's yeah, so starting to surface flood, wildfire, drought, all exacerbated by this intensive logging that's happening everywhere. And so it came to this, BC does not lack awareness. It lacks a viable alternative system. So part of the mapping was the dreaming of what it was that they could do. And so they came up with it's this really inspiring project called oh God, I've just lost it right now, but it's the New Forest Act that they're proposing for the government. And so they put this amazing presentation together to share the mapping that they did and then the vision that they had. And I wanted to share that. So they mapped a new forestry system for BC, and they part of them doing that was saying we don't want to just tinker around the edges. We actually, when we look at everything that's going wrong, you can't tinker around the edges. This has got to systemically change. And so then that's what they started doing. And they started to let's talk about forests as infrastructure, restoration as economic activity, and all of the things that could go with that. They proposed three priorities for the new Forestry Act: ecology, community-based decision-making, stable community economies. And then they started to drill down, what does that actually mean? And they started looking at governance and how decisions have been made. So this is why they're like, they systemically are showing a different way. And drilling down even further, they wanted community forest boards. So this is like the local knowledge keepers actually contributing to the decision making. So part of why I wanted to share this was I thought, wow, this is very much like what we're talking about within Regenerate Cascadia, which is decentralized and place-based decision making, starting to actually, because that's where the knowledge is held. And so then out of that, so through their mapping, through their looking at the data and then coming up and imagining something different, started to actually imagine what supports this work, and what is an economy that actually is starting to honor and being able to lift up the processes that they were valuing. And and listed them out. So yeah, so I thought, I'll stop sharing. I just thought this was, when I saw this presentation a week ago, I just thought this would be amazing to come and share with you, especially given the theme of what we're going to be talking about today. So I'll stop sharing. Yeah. So I'm going to, I'm going to hand over to Brandon.
Sure. And I think just to say, thank you very much for that presentation, Claire. I think that was a wonderful and beautiful example of everything that we're talking about. And I think, yeah, and then maybe Claire, you can share where that presentation came from, and then maybe share links in the Mighty Network so that people can find it after, because I think it's such a great resource. And with that, I think I will table. I was going to share a little bit to answer David Haskell's question, but I will table that to next week. And I think I would love to give time now to turn over to Taya, Gaia, and Mahol, just to talk more about their background, and then also what do we mean when we say bioregional finance, and specifically what are we hoping to build as a group, as a community, as a program. And with that, yeah, thanks for joining us here today, and I would love to turn it over to you three.
When you turn it over to three people, it's a bit tricky to know who's going to go first. Gaia and Mahal, do either one of you want to jump in, or I'm happy to if you don't want to.
I'm happy with whatever order works best. Yeah. I have no doubt you do a great job, Mahal. You've been working on something. Yeah, but whatever works best for the group.
Can't see Mahal, so I don't want to jump on toes. Oh, you've got your mute undone.
Yeah, sure, sure. Go ahead. Please go ahead. I'm
All
just
right.
standing by.
So I think it might work for me to go first because I want to I've never shared much about my background with any of the group here, but I want to share some of the larger background patterns, barriers and opportunities within climate solutions that I've come across in my background, and that I firmly believe the bioregion and BioFi programs that we're working on are actually looking to resolve. So that could be a nice sort of larger framework for the BioFi work. So my background is 20 years as a leadership, development, team development, capacity builder, organizational culture transformation, just helping individuals and groups reach their vision and making sure their vision is one that can have the most impact. Since the pandemic, I pivoted from in-room facilitation, capacity building, to working in rapid prototyping of systemic climate solutions. And that led to me gaining enough deep generalist systemic knowledge to be able to offer what I call systemic system strategic impact services. So helping to co-design projects and co-deliver those projects from a strategy that's grounded in whole systems and that is helping to build whole systems capacities within all the people that are involved in the project. And so what I'd like to talk a little bit about today are a couple of areas. So centralized and decentralized systems for solutions and some things I've learned from those two. Mitigation and adaptation as some of the core areas we talk about and we fund within climate change. And then the important role of monitoring, reporting and verification, or MRV. We've been referring to that internally as our community-based indicators. These MRV potentially serves as the connective tissue between our decentralized approach at landscape levels into potentially more centralized funding vehicles that the BioFi program can hopefully bring into reality. And so when the pandemic started, I became a co-founder of a climate change solution startup called Earthbank. And they were a tech company. They were looking at how to use financial technology and satellite technology to improve monitoring, reporting, and verification. But their strategy was to use carbon credit market forces and to provide access to those markets to the 500 million smallholders who are active land stewards and regenerators living all over the planet in place, but are blocked from the market due to the size of the land package that they steward. So they wanted to solve that problem. They were similar to Regenerate Cascadia. They were looking to aggregate smallholder packets into a larger project that could then be eligible to sell carbon credits in the global market. And so our version of that is landscape level organizing that can aggregate into eco-region and bioregional portfolios that can then be funded by a central funding vehicle. So some of the learnings we had in those early pioneering days at the beginning of the pandemic was that the social infrastructure on the ground between the smallholders was absolutely critical to that goal of aggregation. The communication, the education, the coordination, the strategic innovations such as community-owned technology being shared across the whole project base, such as a tree planting tractor. This was absolutely key. And so as we know, the Bioregion program is designed to bring that social infrastructure. And then the second big learning was that monitoring, reporting, and verification is a critical component to accessing green finance, whether it's through carbon markets or sustainable land bonds, or in our case, through funds and DAFs. It's currently a huge bottleneck, and it's the most underfunded part of climate solutions. That's currently happening today. So if we pull back to the bigger picture, trillions of dollars are earmarked for green finance from family offices, from governments, etc. Very large amounts of money, but they need vehicles and rails to move along. And of course, the fundamental question of how does large chunks of money get to the ground where mitigation and adaptation are actually happening, that's what we here together are trying to resolve. And so the climate solutions world, as I've experienced it, is heavily geared and funded toward mitigation, which is strictly taking carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it, with adaptation being a nice co-benefit. And so you'll see this in recent reports on the carbon market. There'll be picture after picture after picture of forest, empty forest. You don't see very many pictures of animals. You see no pictures of people. And this is quite problematic. So When I was at Earthbank, I was able to be the lead writer and researcher on the world's first global drought relief and sustainable land bonds feasibility study. And that was interesting because I was able to then go into researching sustainable finance and learn that it leans heavily on green bonds. So green bonds sound pretty cool, right? Green, like probably trees, probably nature, but in actual fact, only 5% of green bonds are funding nature-based solutions. The rest is going to technical solutions such as methane capture. And I'd actually like to open up to the group. Why do you think that is? Why is 95% of the green bond market not focused on nature-based solutions, but on tech-based solutions?
Profit.
Well, profit, and why? Why is there more profit in the tech world than the nature world?
Because there's infrastructure in the whole system to be able to generate money around technology that can target one specific thing rather than seeing the whole ecosystem of everything that goes into it. It's not just
So
methane.
I would say definitely profit, and the reason technical solutions have 95% of that portfolio is because they are less complex and they don't involve people. They involve systems and processes, engineered systems, we should say. And so people are both necessary for sustainable mitigation because people living in place are those with the best access and motivation to steward their landscapes. But people, from an investment and a funding perspective, are also the riskiest element in a mitigation project because their livelihoods depend on those landscapes, and they are often forced to make short-term choices, such as cutting down mangroves for firewood to sell to make ends meet. And so an example of this, nature-based solutions such as forest conservation projects are hugely vulnerable to the following. There's not a local presence stewarding them. They're too big and large. The monitoring, reporting, and verification is very costly and very ineffective. External consultancy companies come in, they're flowing in, they measure tree width with large tape measures. They're not using innovative or broad ways of going, what is the health of this ecosystem? They're only measuring one tiny percentage of that forest, and they're coming in every 5 years, which means literally a forest could have been burned to the ground or cut down, and that project is still selling carbon credits on the market, and it takes years to catch up. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background around that because bioregion and BioFi, from my perspective, are designed with these learnings in mind. The social infrastructure is coming in service of a whole system view of land and place. We're building from that bottom-up foundation, which, as I'm sure Mahul is going to talk about, puts us in right relationship, culturally, ecologically, spiritually. The communities themselves, you as landscape stewards, are now empowered to play the critical role of naming what health in your ecosystems looks like and identifying how you'd like to be responsible for MRV, because monitoring, reporting, and verification is the system that funders need to be able to mitigate risk in their investments and to track impact. If those are held in your hands and innovated according to how you'd like to steward the land and monitor its progress, it makes it much more likely that the MRV will be coming in service of the funding flowing. And also, we're using a decentralized place-based template that can also be aggregated into larger scales. So I might just stop there and say that's why I'm particularly excited about the BioFi program coming in at this stage to work hand in hand. I hope you can see how without BioRegen, without your work, we wouldn't be able to have a BioFi program. But because of the work that you're doing in the field, we do. And in terms of what's coming next, the five of us, Claire, Brandon, Mahul, Gaia, and myself, will be co-designing the strategy. And a big chunk of that strategy includes network level field research and relationship building, field level, I should say, and you will all be a part of that. So this BioFi program won't be happening to you or at you. You will be integrated into it from the ground up. And with that, I'd like to say thanks for listening and open the floor up for Gaia and Mahul to say some words.
Well, that was amazing. Thank you. And also, very much, I feel like we are in service to the regenerators, as I call them sometimes. So that's definitely we couldn't do anything to you. Also, so this is Ella, and she loved your background. And she wonders, and I told her it's the rainforest, and she had two questions. Are we going to go there sometime? And two, is it raining? So
You definitely are invited anytime you'd like, and it's been raining for months and months and months, and today the sunshine has come out.
oh, that's nice, right, Ella? Okay. Um, I'm gonna hand it over to Mahal and then get Ella to bed with her daddy. And then I'll be able to maybe jump in and go into a little bit more of substance.
Great. Thanks, Taya and Gaia. It's good to chat with you all. I mean, I think Taya covered a lot there. Um, what I would say a little bit about my specific interest. A little bit of my background. I started my work with bioregional financing maybe about 15 years ago in South Africa, in the east coast of South Africa, where we did some of the first water bonds. So financing mechanisms in which we use outcomes funders and develop these financial instruments to get regeneration on the ground happening by leveraging outcomes or future returns, or not just profit, etc. And at that time, it was quite a revolutionary idea. So it's, and had been implemented by a few organizations around the world, like Common Land, for returns. There were a lot of Dutch NGOs that were involved at that time, and it was a very interesting time. And Common Land now has kind of grown and is doing such amazing work around the world. Um, and More recently, uh, I think at that time, as we moved from the 90s into the 2000s, there was still this kind of hope um, that we could somehow make the case to the capitalists and the neoliberalists that somehow we could slow this crazy machine down and actually start to conserve some of the key resources that we have on our planet. But as we sit here in 2026, that reality is becoming not really something that's plausible anymore. And so a few years ago, I worked with Climate Works Foundation, which is they're one of the I think the top three climate funders in the world, and with Ma Earth, and did a cross-sectional research study with about 36 bioregional projects around the globe. So not just focused in North America, it was from everywhere from New Zealand to North India, South Africa, Central America, the Sacred Headwaters, a whole bunch of projects. And what we were asking them, and what we were really trying to get to is what did you, as a bioregional practitioner, or funder, or somebody who's involved in understanding the system, what are the causal mechanisms that you were identifying as critical? Like what actually is bioregionalism? Or what is regenerative agriculture? Like what are the things that actually uh, um, kind of become the outcomes that you're searching for, and what are those outcomes? And what we found is really interesting. There were many different answers, and so we took all the results. It was like about a few like 100 hours of interviews, and I did a textual analysis of it and identified the key things that were common. And so we identified five what we call the five pathways to regeneration that were connected. We also found that most projects did one or two. Like they would focus on regenerative agriculture, or they would focus on community development, or they work on land back, or indigenous sovereignty, rights of nature. They kind of did pieces of all of these, but none of them really focused on all together. There were a few, one or two that actually did focus on all of them. But the key thing that we found was what bioregionalism means, very much like the way the term was coined, not just a process of conserving nature or being concerned with natural resources or a relationship to nature, but it was rather about a transformation of consciousness, about subjectivity. It was a transformation of like not just like our relationship to nature, but how we see ourselves within nature. And this was a really profound discovery, I think. I mean, I think I was hoping we would get there when we started the research, but as we did the research, this was one of the key findings. And along with this, we also found bioregional governance to be a key part of it. We found the new forms of economic exchange and development, so like new forms of commons. There was a very strong social justice aspect. And yeah, and so we laid out these five pathways to regeneration, and it was a really interesting report. And what it highlighted for me is that you can't really separate when consciousness stops becoming about a subject and an object, but becomes about a relational web. There are some really interesting consequences about how we measure impact, how we measure bioregionalism, and so that's really what I'm trying to focus on. To be more specific, I think one of the key things that I think is important with this burgeoning bioregional movement is that on the side of the funders, they they intuit and understand that there is a deep need, as Melanie was pointing out, to fund ecosystemically. They understand, they have the intuition as things are collapsing, as 35 degrees in London, 40 degrees in Italy this week. People are starting to understand that there is an urgent need um, to create impact in this way, but they still lack the framework of how to assess bioregional projects and to assess impact and to actually understand what's happening there. Similarly, people working on the landscapes and in the landscapes have the most altruistic intentions and the greatest visions and the greatest passion to transform these bioregions, but also don't really have fully a framework to assess their capability. And so one of the things that I'm really interested in my research, and what I think is the thing that's going to bridge funders, kind of tertiary organizations like Regenerate Cascadia, and people on the ground like yourself, is a framework. And this framework doesn't have to be some sort of monolithic thing, but a set of heuristics, a set of understandings of what bioregionalism means. So that's really where I'm placing a lot of my emphasis right now. And hopefully that will become a kind of a learning journey, organizing process for funders, so that they can kind of go through this transformation of consciousness and recognition there.
Amazing. Thank you, Mahol. Gaia, are you there? Maybe. There we are. Are you able to go?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So many things to look into, but maybe just a little bit of a background first. I you could say I came a little bit from the other side in the sense that I worked in the corporate. I started in finance and then I worked in the corporate sector, also U.S. corporate sector for a long time. So I also thought for a while that, multinationals are not perfect, but if we can, we could change the system from within, and with if we just incorporate a price, internalize externalities, and we, all those things, and we get the right, better pricing, we can still do this within the current economic system. And I think after a while, you end up realizing not just that it's not possible, but also it was never really designed for that. Like, for example, what as Taya mentioned, I don't think if you price everything in, it's not more profitable to invest in tech, but it's more, the profit is much more easier to hoard if it's owned by the community. You can't hoard it. You can't accumulate it to the top 1%. And I think that's more the driver than if you look at a macro level. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you take into account the externalities and the risk and everything. And I think a lot of that comes ultimately the system is designed to breed inequality. And I think in that sense, there's also a large governmental aspect. And that's what in the Seattle area, we have a lot of tech people, and some of them they became wealthy sort of by accident, and they're properly uncomfortable with the amount of money. And they say, I want to invest in systems change, but I'm actually mostly worried about a devolution into fascism. And for me, that's also a very important aspect about this. It's really giving back. People are going to call me a communist, but you're giving back the means of provisions to the community, to the people, and there's not really freedom without that. If you don't own your means of provision, you can't say no to a fascist government or a tech empire. And without the ability to say no, you're not free. So I think there's a lot. I completely agree with what Mahol said. The bioregionalism, it's so much more than just environment. It really is all of these things, the social justice, but also very much the governmental aspect. Um, and that's where I feel like in some way I feel like I'm super behind because I don't know how to grow things. So I feel like I said, I have a lot of humility coming into this to people who are actually doing the work. I have spent a lot of time in the financial sector, so in that bridging, I think I can add value. Although I will say that I think it's very tricky to. I think there's a high risk of co-optation. I think for all its flaws, capitalism is very good at co-optation. That's why it's so inherently flawed that it's actually very surprising that it has lasted this long. And I think one of the key things is because it's so good at co-optation. So for me, it's to some extent even the MRV is still the quantification that for me is part of the old mindset as well. It's a lot of things you just simply can't quantify, and it's like it's just inherent. It's like what is something that's sacred, because that's what this is about, right? You're putting sanctity back into everything that's alive, and you can't quantify that. It's if I ask you how much does your daughter cost? You don't just say, "Oh, she's not for sale." You want to punch him in the face because it feels nuts. You're taking the sanctity away of that living being. So for me, it's just about being uncomfortable holding that dual role. I think that's what it is because we need a lot of funding. It needs to be it needs to be flowing. So I feel that's ultimately my role, asking regenerators what they need and see how I can best translate that to wherever people are in their journey in the legacy system. I hope that wasn't too much all over the place. But that's really what I bring here. I would love to hear, and I already heard some of, I was really amazed by all the work that's been doing, but I would love to hear maybe a little bit more about, what are your funding needs? What have you been doing so far? When where are you in your journey of blended finance, for example? I'm under the impression that we're still in the early phases where it should be mostly grant money, but it would be great to hear that from you. Yeah, that's yeah. I would if you have any questions for us, let us know. But also, I would love to give that question back to you.
And I might just add, definitely as part of the BioFi strategy, like I mentioned, there's a whole field mapping and sense making piece. And so various members of the BioFi team, definitely Gaia, there'll be lots of opportunity for one-to-one check-ins with landscape groups to really download your unique local context and your unique orientation in your journey towards BioFi. But yeah, let's have a chat. Anyone want to throw some questions or comments, or reflections, additions, Christoph?
Yeah, thank you all for sharing that really deep and rich context of your backgrounds and experiences and perspectives. That was really inspiring and exciting to hear. And trying to synthesize all that is I'm not even going to attempt to try to do anything like that or to. I just want to pose the question, maybe what do you all think a framework for um, identifying the criteria or pathways towards bioregionalism looks like, and how that would dovetail with funding mechanisms, and maybe can we put some temporal scale around that? Are we talking, we're going to get a rough framework up and operational in 9 months? Or are we looking at 18 months? Or what are you all thinking internally? I know you've probably had some conversations already, but maybe you haven't come to that level of consensus yet around a framework or a timeline. But I just love to kind of hear maybe each of your thoughts, just really briefly around that.
And I might just jump in here just before all of you go, is just to say there's something pretty amazing about just introducing people to each other, taking the abstraction of people's names and a title and what have you, and just allowing you to see who the others are so that we're real people. And so we were excited to introduce you, but everyone's just stepping into these positions. So generally talk, and I'd love to hear what they have to say, but I just wanted to say we're right at the very beginning, and there's a kind of, from my perspective, when we've talked about this, it's a kind of moving from the space of BioFi to the people on the ground, sort of, and where do we meet, and how do we develop language so that we're understanding each other and we're not dealing in abstractions. I think that's where the co-opting often happens. If we can keep it real, it's ground truth. Yeah. So over to you, Gaia, Mahol, and Taya.
Maybe what I would say is I think fundamentally it's an alignment issue. When two it's an alignment issue, and it's also an organizing problem, because there's a fair bit of organizing, movement organizing, coalition building that needs to be happening with the funding process. But funders also need to go through the process of like kind of self-reflection, education, understanding. There's a whole journey that funders need to go through. And then at the same time, people in the landscape need to understand the common taxonomy, the languaging that funders will understand. And then hopefully with some serendipity making, we get some partnerships, like that's really the process that's required. And that's not necessarily a straight line. Obviously, sometimes it can happen a lot quicker. But my experience with funding some of the most radical movements, global movements in the world, a lot of the time it takes um, deep relational building and with that narrative building. How do you build a common language, the common taxonomies, the ways of understanding each other? And I think I wish I could say this would just happen in a few months, but I think that task, which is the most kind of fundamental task, is going to take some time. And I don't just think it's on the funder side. I think people in landscapes also have to go through this deep transformation um, of what they understand their role to be and how they talk about bioregionalism, for example. Yeah.
And I would just quickly add on to that. I think, MVP and scoping is still really important. It's like when we look at bioregion and BioFi, it's like, what is the minimum amount of community-based indicators and strategy and storytelling that we as on-ground practitioners need to bring to funders to help them over their first edge and to get them to start to play and invest and see what happens and be on the learning journey with us. What is the minimum level of criteria and matrices that funders need to feel secure in that initial play zone, and that's something we'll be working out together because that's emergent.
So I just want to take a moment, and so we are at getting towards 8:30. I just want to say I think we are welcome if Gaia, Mahal, Taya, if you have time to stay on. I think we're welcome to stay on and get to more questions and answer. And if you need to go, that's totally okay and check in. And then I just want to also say there's a couple questions in the chat. And so I think I'll go to Corey's question, and then David, we can go to your question, and then Claire Strawn, we can go to your question. But Corey, I saw your question come in that what is the envisioned bridge between these high-level finance worlds and our work on the ground? And I think that's a question that a lot of us have. So I wonder if the three of you have any thoughts about that.
Well, you've used the term envisioned. I think what we've done well is to come up with some sort of programmatic map that we can hold. We've got an education, engagement, and capacity building funnel in bioregion with the learning journey, with the landscape groups programming, with the LHC. And we know that brings into the field one piece of the puzzle. We want to replicate that with funders and investors, education, engagement, co-learning, community of practice. We the journey, and we know that these, and we hold firm to our tenets that on-ground regenerators and funders must be working interdependently. And we've got our core tenet of culture transformation and economic transformation by being grounded in letting landscapes lead and giving voice to landscapes. And so I would say at this point, particularly from an emergent strategy perspective, we've got some strong North Stars for us to get into the quote unquote sandbox together and play and sense make and co-learn. That would be my sort of simplest way of answering the envisioned piece.
Yeah, if I can add to that, there's several things. First of all, I like the term flow funding because it works both ways. So you need to have funding as to sustain, and at the same time, you can also drown in too much. And I think this is it's very easy to feel like there's never enough money because there's so much artificial scarcity that's created in this economy, but there is no lack of money. It's just hoarded and concentrated at the top. The reason that I think these are very crucial moments in history. I know that sounds dramatic, but I think we are there. I think there were times in history where not that much happened every year, and I feel like we have decades every year, and I believe that's because we're in a collapse, which doesn't mean the end of humanity by any means, but it means the end of the current system, and it's also a flattening of hierarchies. I have next month, although technically tomorrow, I guess, but a little bit later in July, there's a paper that's going to come out in the journal Wealth and Investment, so that's for wealth advisors. And it's about post-growth portfolio theory. So I wrote that together with a wealth advisor at Morgan Stanley. And she advises very wealthy people, and she also thinks that we need to change this mindset of alpha seeking. That's the idea, right? You have to beat the market, to beta building, because we're in different times. And so the old methods simply will not work even for you to protect your portfolio anymore. That's one reason. Another reason is, of course, that we're seeing a massive wealth transfer as well between baby boomers and their children. And what I understand from people is that there's an expectancy, at least in the US, but I think it's probably not that different in Canada, of like 90% of the wealth advisors are just going to be fired because the children have different values and they want to invest in systems, and their wealth advisors are not giving them any of the advice that they're asking for. They're saying, oh, well, we can exclude Tesla. They're like, no, I'm not. That's not what I'm asking at all. I want, like, if this is the best you can do for me, I need someone else. So there's a lot of money, I think, that's going to be unlocked, and our goal would be to tap into that, but then in a way that we have a steady flow, without drowning you, and also just building in a way that we don't make the same mistakes as that are still in the old system. The old system is changing by itself because it's collapsing, but there's still the old ways, and we are sort of the gatekeepers where we're like, yes, that can come in. No, not that. We're keeping that out, if that makes sense. And for us in the US, I think we're gonna. Somebody mentioned Sandbox, and we had an event in Seattle last week. Brendan was there as well, and Claire with Lily Starling was setting up a DAF Commons, and she literally called a DAF. That's just a legal structure of a sandbox because it's so unregulated and it's so flexible. So that's probably the vehicle that we will be using with a good partner that understands what systems investing is.
Great.
Amazing. Yeah, David McLeod, what is your question?
Well, Gaia just answered my question. I was going to ask, the idea that we're in collapse, if we're acknowledging that, then how optimistic are we that we're going to be able to get adequate funding? That was going to be my question.
Sorry, could you say that again, David? I was just writing and I just didn't quite capture.
If we're acknowledging that we're in collapse, then how optimistic are we that we're going to be able to get adequate funding for the projects that we want to do?
What an awesome question. I'm actually more optimistic than I've ever been before. And that's very recent. I've nearly finished reading a book called Stella, which is quite short. And it talks about the technological disruption that cannot be stopped now in terms of solar, wind, battery, AI, etc. And talks about how that system, well, I guess what I'm saying is I think when we talk about BioFi, I think Gaia spoke really well to the fact that we're in a transition zone. And so our job is to work that transition. And this is where the strategy needs to come in. How do you work a transition so that you're leveraging existing vehicles because you need them? And that's because it's the only language that is now spoken, but you're not being co-opted by the underlying extractive mindset. You're still holding the new old cultural transformative mindset. And at the same time, we're prototyping new foundations for how those systems can be changing or even building a new system through real life examples. So that's one piece I wanted to say, is that we're in transition. But I also want to remind people that BioFi, as we're orienting to it, is not just a bioregional vehicle. It is local, eco-regional and bioregional funding ecosystems, and developing those at the same time. Because if we look at the level of disruption and the scale that we can most maintain, as this global society is collapsing with all of its centralized global mechanisms that are so slow and hard to interact with, local, municipal, watershed level becomes the scale that we're most likely to be able to build community funding ecosystems around. So we will absolutely be doing both and at the same time. At least I hope we will be.
David, just to add to that, I'm glad I was able to at least answer your question. I also think so. Yes, I think this transition will actually, in many ways, unlock more finance that was previously just stuck at the top, and I sense in that question perhaps also an assumption that collapse is basically tantamount to the apocalypse, and it is very undesirable. But I would also add that what we know of collapse is only in written records, and throughout history, most the people were illiterate. So who wrote those records? Scribes that were paid by kings. So this idea that a collapse is the apocalypse is true for the 1%. They have by far the most to lose during a collapse. And again, I don't want to minimize the very tumultuous times we're facing, because there's going to be a global collapse for the first time. So it's going to be pretty epically disruptive. But I also think there's a lot of I also have found, as Taya, a fairly recent hope in the sense that it does allow us to be more authentically and more free as human beings. I do think that this is what our brains have evolved for this during the Paleolithic, to just come together as communities and in very egalitarian ways. It's what we do best, and it's where we thrive. We're not built for this much inequality, and it's causing a lot of suffering even for people who are on the abundant side of this economy. So in that sense, I think there's a lot to in I wouldn't say to look forward to, because collapse, it's not pleasant, but I do think there's a lot still to get excited about, and there are some positive things about it.
Thank you.
I just want to say, in when it comes to collapse, it's well studied, and we're talking about human civilization collapse, but we know that collapse of systems happens in nature all the time. And what we see in these collapse moments is a bifurcation point in the system. And that bifurcation point represents two choices for the system: to continue to not adapt and go into deeper levels of entropy, or to, and as we see in nature, there's often huge level up moments and actually level up towards something more conducive to the conditions of life. And we'll see in human societal collapses, there will be the bifurcation point, and it might look like, oh no, it went in the direction of fascism or whatever, but you'll also be able to see some sort of core new seed that ends up being responsible for birthing a new level of consciousness further on down the line. So I guess what I want to say is collapse is scary, but it's also natural, and it's a natural form of disruption, and much can come from it. And for us to be consciously orienting towards that part of collapse, I think is helpful and healthy.
When things break apart, that gives opportunity for new ideas to form. So that, like the C.S. Hollings complex adaptive system thing, that comes back to a regenerative cycle.
And this is one of my personal mottos: never waste a crisis, but in my personal life, but I think it also applies to civilization collapse.
Yeah,
How
that's
about
wonderful. And just curious, Mahol, if do you have anything to add or want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, David just mentioned Hollings, and I was gonna say, that's exactly what I was gonna respond. I think maybe more succinctly, I would say the one thing capitalism can't do is think bi-regionally. Um, and that's where I think the value will come from. And to kind of riff off what both Gaia and Taya are saying, when a forest burns down, there's a multitude of seeds that start to grow. And I think this is what the bi-regional kind of project really is. And there is, and I think what we kind of need to shift funders around is, like, if they can fund in a very kind of experimental manner with all of these new seeds that are coming. Some of them will take hold, some of them won't. Um, but those bi-regional projects, the ones that are working in kind of localized, very kind of relational ways, are the ones that are going to succeed. And from this kind of collapse will be, the composting of modernity. That bioregionalism is really, really well placed to kind of develop, prototype, experiment with, try new ways of relating, try new ways of commenting, new ways of economic structures. And so that's really what I think is going to happen.
And that can bring in the ideas that you were talking about earlier, and possibilities of a transformation in consciousness when the old modernity gets composted.
It's really beautiful. I just want to jump in for a minute and make sure that we touch on, and then Claire Strawn's question real quick, and then Genevieve and Chapit, I'd love to go over to you for your question. But just real briefly in the chat, Claire Strawn had just asked, um, tell us more about the relationship of these people to RC. So I'm wondering if Mahol, Gaia, and Taya, if you'd like to kind of jump in. And I might just even add, like, not only what is your relationship, but how do you see like the next year progressing, and what do you hope comes from this connection? And maybe to start, I'd love to turn it over to you, Mahol, to start us off, or Gaia.
Sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I used to be a consultant at KPMG, so I would very much push back on that label to start with. I really, if you talk about relationship, I'm in it for the long term. So the term we use in the US is fractional leadership. Um, but what it means is that I work a part-time at Regenerate Cascadia, but very much with a long-term commitment. It's absolutely not my intention to go, hey, so here's the report. I talked to a couple of people. You do it now. I feel like that's basically what consultancy comes down to. So that's not it. I'm here in here for the long term. Yeah, and as a part of the core team. That's how I see myself.
Wonderful. And Mahol, I would love to hand over to you.
Great. Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, so I'm on the Canadian side and kind of working in concert with Gaia on the US side, and with Claire and Brandon and Taya. So yeah, it was really beautiful in just maybe as a kind of metaphor, early on in the conversation where I heard the work that's happening in Whatcom and the organizing work that's happening there. That's the way I see my role, except with kind of funders and people who are involved in funding strategy. So I think fundamentally there's an organizing function that's needed, and it's also a narrative function. Like, how do we actually seed and educate funders in new ways of knowing and being. So that's the kind of way I see myself. I'm also in a bit of a part-time role, but really excited, and this work is super important to me and to many parts of kind of my history. So yeah, feel good to be here.
I might just add in here, Mahol's been amazingly helpful in helping with the setup of the Canadian nonprofit side, actually called Cascadian North Services Society. So, and that's going to start holding the Canadian side. Genevieve and Shapit.
Oh, I guess it's my turn. Um, yeah, this has been such a wonderful conversation for me. Thank you. Mahol, you were just talking about the ways we do things, and like I'm imagining one of um, the big things that can happen with the funds as they're coming in is um, looking at some of those models of social companies that are actually they're like the entire town that's a co-op in um, where is it, Spain, where they're capping salary differences and using non-hierarchical systems. So if we're bringing funding into our landscape and funding a particular company because of the work they're doing, also, with that, restructuring the company with, non-hierarchical leadership and, compressed salary differences and, everybody's, changing ownership of the company along the way. Um, so, sort of really bringing the dollars to the places that are doing things in holistic ways is part of what I'm thinking about. I'd love to hear impact of that.
I'm yeah. What Mahal said, I heard it. Yeah, I think that all of that makes a ton of sense. I see when I talk about blended finance, the especially market rate, but in general, interest is very aggressive. So you typically start with just giving with grants. Over time, if you do it right, I do think you can start to you have some community wealth building, which I think is very closely aligned with bioregionalism. And you could even start to bring in some revolving funds, so just below market rate investments in a business that is profitable, but not as the ultimate goal. So it's profit making, but not profit maximizing. I think that's the difference. It's not just this one person at the top, but for example, it's co-owned, and there are many ways that you can assess a business on. So all of those things would definitely be part of the investment strategy, in my view.
I'm not sure if I heard a question in the chat, but what I did hear is something I think it's a really good example of working within a transition period. It's not like corporations are evil. It's not like all economic vehicles are evil. You know, we can be bringing change to those whilst using them at the same time. You know, we don't have to throw out the old in order to bring in the new. And in fact, in some ways, in transition is about how you respectfully and strategically keep both going, as long as you're aware of where and when one's fading out and one's coming into being, so that you can match your goals with where you're trying to get to.
Yeah, I do think some legal structures are sociopathic, by the way. I think being stock listed is just, I don't think we'll be doing that. Yeah.
I think it's over to you, John.
I guess a question that comes to mind, some of us have been involved for some time with the efforts to establish public banks. You know, there's the longstanding example of the Bank of North Dakota. And I'm curious, that's kind of a longer term project, but in Washington, that's moving along. It is in California. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed a feasibility study in Oregon, and some of us are trying to get that back on track. But it seems like in some respects, that models kind of a synthesis of what we're talking about, where it's a traditionally run bank that just outperforms all of the major banks and is keeping funds. It stems capital flight. It keeps funding locally, funds, all kinds of infrastructure. I mean, they give some of the best student loan rates. So it seems like a fundamental part of what maybe we need to be thinking about, how to integrate that into our longer term thinking of what does the future of BioFi financing actually look like. And so I'd be curious if people have some thoughts about that.
Mahal, could I invite you to speak to the piece in your concept note around how right now the field is coming in from their own lineage? Whether it's governance focused or capital focused. And I think, John's talking about, and other people on the call, another lineage, which is bi-regional banks and public banks. Would you like to speak
Yeah.
to that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I think my camera is off. Yeah. I think these from the research that we did with successful bioregional projects. I mean, successful, I think um, maybe not the best term, but the projects that we're doing bioregionalism, a key part of what we found was both the development of new forms of commoning. So, like for example, the bank that you're talking about, but also commons in terms of knowledge commons, in terms of resources, infrastructure, financing, all of these things. Um, and that's one aspect, as Tea's referring to. The other aspect is understanding that money is just one symbol of value, right? And so, actually recreating and reframing what value is within a landscape. And so a lot of people's, as collapse has been a very prominent word in our discussion today, and as these systems continue to cascade and collapse, people are going to be less driven by like digital tokens or things like that, but and more how are their needs being satisfied. And so that's kind of where we want to get to. It's like we want to start creating financing commons, money commons, etc., to fund the projects. But over time, and I'm talking about a bit of a longer time, we also want to figure out how food systems, livelihoods, all of these things can start to flourish within the bioregion. And I think livelihood is a really interesting frame that we need to be addressing for bioregional work is how can we live well, live healthily, and support each other in that way. But to your point around banks, I think that is a really smart and interesting trajectory for some of this work.
I think that's a very good point. The livelihoods, because it's sometimes I keep things very simple, and so will say things like, you have to participate in capitalism. That's the whole point. You're if you don't participate in the growth pursuit, you'll die. And I think that is what it comes down to. But if you want to get really in the nitty-gritty, it's more useful to talk about livelihoods because it's a whole complex thing. And there are many ways you can satisfy your needs that are universal, but there are many different ways you can do that. So it depends on place ultimately. I think to answer the question about the banking, for me, that is why we would start with a DAF. I think setting up a bank is a big deal. So there are a lot of legal things around it. You have to have some proper capital startup. And I absolutely have no desire to start a public bank or community bank just for the sake of having a bank. The idea would be that is my longer term vision. Actually, I think over time that would make sense. Because then it's easier to, for example, in a bank, match different horizons. So you have some projects are already there and you can have a 2 or 5 year plan. And some like, listen, this is going to be 10 years to build. And so in a bank, that is the best way to match these different kind of funds that also come with their own horizons of like, you can have this for 5 years or 2 years. And with all the projects, but it also is a lot more infrastructure that you wouldn't want to start with a bank. Somebody mentioned biocredits. As a bank, you can of course easier get that out, and we don't have to talk a ton about this because I don't think this is going to happen anytime soon. But I do think over time there might be value in if you look at people who are advising governments in Europe, for example, about catastrophic global risks, one of the things that they say is have something in place where you can, if the euro falls, that you can have local community currency to keep resources flowing. And I see that for Cascadia as well, that we would have our it can be a biocredit or whatever. I don't think biocredit is very good actually. I think it should be like the Cascas or something. I don't know, but that is all part of the longer term vision as well. That sort of things that you can do better as a bank, but it's not the near term things we're going to start with. We're going to start, I think, more with a more flexible fund structure. I hope that answers the question.
And so this is where MVP mindset and scoping to unique local context is so important. You can hear the guy's experience around financial vehicles allows her to bring a totally strategic approach to what is the low-hanging fruit that's short-term and the conditions are already in place, but that will also prove out or provide certain capacities to that local landscape and group so that we can move on to a more mature or more medium-term next step around the funding ecosystem. And that's going to be coming out of deep sense making that we'll be doing together, that the strategy will definitely include.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. And I see, I just want to say thank you so much. I think we're at about 8:57. So I would love to just give a few minutes to close out. And maybe we could just end with everybody just giving some words of gratitude and then what's very exciting is Gaia and Mahol and Taya are all stepping on the team to really work and come in service to the Landscape Hub Cultivator, to landscape groups, to stewards, to all of this work more broadly. And so we are hoping we'll all stay connected in the Mighty Networks, but they are here. And so definitely reach out, talk to them. And I think we're really excited for what the next year holds. So with all of that, I just want to say thank you. And with just start to close out.
Thanks for sharing, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Did Not everybody has to go, but if you'd like to share a gratitude, just a short one, and pass it on so that we keep it moving.
Very grateful people are dedicating such amazing interconnected support to all this. Very grateful. I'll pass to Genevieve and Shapit.
Oh, so it's such a rich and like stimulating conversation for the stuff I've been thinking about lately.
Yeah, thank you. This
Or
is
the suggestion to the orcas. I like that. So thank you for that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Claire Strawn.
Kale Bucks is my vote. Um, yeah, just thank you for what your articulations are encouraging to me, because that's kind of how I see things working forward. And I didn't know if we were on the same page or not. And I'm really excited that we are. Yes, Brandon, Kale Bucks. That's a Eugene thing.
Who are you going to pass on to?
Oh, pass to uh, Tom Buxton. He's not there. Pass to John L.
People that know me know that I occasionally talk about cosmic endorsement. And what I would say is a convergence of the three people that have joined the RC team is clearly an indicator of cosmic endorsement. It is very encouraging to hear about the background and the convergence of this experience base that's very broad and significant in what I think are challenging times. And I appreciate the perspective you all have. Collapse isn't necessarily apocalyptic. It's really more opportunity. And I think Gaia maybe touched on it. Human beings, we're a collaborative learning creature and we're a cooperative creature. And that's our ultimate strength. And so we can come together and solve problems. So I appreciate that very much. And
Who do you want to pass to?
David.
Well, I'll say that collapse is apocalyptic because if you think about the real meaning of the word apocalypse, it's a great unveiling. So everything becomes more clear and the veils come off. And as Hegel said, the owl of Minerva only flies at the dawn. So this feels like a great step forward for Regenerate Cascadia, and so I'm feeling a lot of gratitude and welcome to Gaia and Mehul and Taya.
Great. And who should we pass to?
And let's pass it to Kim.
Thanks, David. Thank you, thank you. I'm really excited right now. I'm loving this. I'm just loving this, and it's so nice to see you again, Gaia. And I can't. I have no words right now. I'm really excited about all of this, and hard things are possible. And this really helps me. So thank you. And I pass to, let's see. Sorry. I can't see. Can someone, I can't, I don't have my glasses on.
Is Deborah there? Or Christoph? And maybe Deborah, if you are there. Maybe you next.
Sure, yeah. Just so much gratitude for all of you and your experience. I'm really just uh, also kind of beside myself, and all the things we've discussed are things I've been reading about and researching on the side for years, and it's just so amazing to have you be a part of this journey with us, to lend your deep expertise and all of these aspects of regenerative finance and systems building. So I'm just really I just feel really blessed to be on this journey with all of you, and I'm looking forward to what's next. So excited about all of this. So thank you all. And I'll pass it to Darren.
Thanks. Yeah, I just feel like just grateful to be in, good company. I really appreciate the yeah, just like the wide boundary perspective that has been brought here, like just, having just a comprehensive you know, like kind of lens and perspective of looking at systems change and where we are and what the theory and means of moving forward is. So yeah, it's nice to meet you, Gaia, and yeah, it's good to see you, Mahul. And just yeah, excited that we're at this point of kind of engaging with the economics and kind of building on all the foundation that we've established thus far. So just feeling really motivated and inspired. And I'll pass it to whoever has not gone yet.
Okay, I'm going to say if you're off camera, put your camera on. Otherwise, we'll go maybe to Taya.
Oh,
You jump in, Melanie.
yeah.
Sure, thank you. Sorry, I'm having a lot of eye strain right now, so it's camera off. But this has been really, really fascinating and super exciting. My background is in measurement, evaluation, and impact assessment, including some impact investing, evaluation stuff. And so it's just music to my ears. And I guess I've kind of been waiting for this conversation as part of the whole Regenerate Cascadia world that I'm still feeling new to. And so can't wait. And put me in coach, would love to help think about some of this, and have done quite a bit of work in the philanthropy space as well. So yeah, I feel like this is the conversation I've really been waiting for, and can't wait to hear the next conversation. So thank you.
Great. How about Tom? You're there. We're finishing off with gratitudes. Are you around, Tom?
Right. There, I'm on.
There you
Yes.
are.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree with that last sentiment that this is a conversation I've been waiting for too, because I've been waiting for us to figure out how we could speak plainly about the future we're trying to build and what the environment we think that future is going to exist in. And so, that we are preparing for some form of collapse. And I find some of my stewards aren't really, fellow stewards aren't prepared for that conversation yet. Right. So we're not all together there, I don't think, but we shall see.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah. Taya.
Well, first and foremost, my gratitude goes to the landscape stewards still on this call. I mean, I hope that the way we framed our initial introductions and vision up is to demonstrate there would be no BioFi without on-ground change agents and regenerators. And I think the other thing I want to say is I'm glad the lens has been large, because I think that the templates we're building, I mean, it could be easy to go Regenerate Cascadia is about bringing more money to landscape groups doing regenerative projects, but it's so much more than that. It's building templates that stack on top of each other, that can be translocally shared and adapted to anywhere else in the world, and can even scale up beyond bioregional levels. And so that is pioneering work. That's going to take some time, and I want you guys to have as much hope and inspiration around being on the longer term journey. just as much as some of those shorter term financial funding goals that we have. And Mahal, have you no, over to you, Mahal.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, it's really great to meet you all. I've heard a lot about your work, and I'm really excited to uh, yeah, start doing this really important work that's needed in the landscape. So great to meet you all, and it's been a pleasure sharing a little bit about my background, and hopefully speak to you more as we go along. And I think I think it's Brandon,
Yes, and
right?
I think I will just express gratitude for everybody who stayed on this long, and I will say thank you to our guests. And this has been an amazing session. This has been recorded. It will be shared on the Mighty Network. We will post it. And yeah, thank you all so much, and excited to see you next time.
Yeah.
So have a
Yeah.
wonderful evening
Why do you want to close us
and
out?
week.
Sure. Yeah, no, just much gratitude that people are here, but that we're having this conversation. Oh my God, if I waited a long time to have this conversation that's coming together. So, yeah. All right. Well, good night, everyone. Thank you.